And the person who tells my little pecan colored kids that they're somehow oppressed based on the color of their skin would be absolutely wrong and absolutely at war with me.
I actually pulled my daughter out of AM Culp because of the fifth grade teacher who lined those students up from whitest to darkest, made them turn around, and the white ones needed to apologize to the black ones. Now, do not tell me that it did not happen, okay, in this district. You need to put an end to this.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. 3 things have destroyed our glorious Western civilization. I have 5 strategies to rebuild our culture. The first thing that has destroyed our civilization is 200 years of anti-Western drivel. Our schools and universities are hell-bent on destroying the traditional family and are even banning the words girls and boys. The desire to destroy the family comes from 2,400 years ago, when Socrates described a communist society where families would not exist and all children would be raised by the state. No parent would know which children were theirs, and no children would know which parents were theirs. Even worse, all individuality would be banned, countries would be banned, private property would be banned, and there would only be one acceptable way of thinking, only one acceptable way of doing things. Independent thought would cease to exist. Communism made a resurgence around the time of the French Revolution of 1789, and in the 1800s there were more than 60 separate attempts to establish communist societies. Now these people really went all out. They truly believed in it, and they gave it absolutely everything, but it simply never worked. Every communist commune that has ever been created has failed. In 1848, the Communist Manifesto was published. The preface states, "A spectre is haunting Europe, the spectre of communism. All the powers of Europe have entered into an unholy alliance to exorcise this spectre." In our time, Jeremy Corbyn and Bernie Sanders ran for the highest office in their lands. Both wish to install socialism or communism. The Communist Manifesto tells us that communism was itself acknowledged to be a major power in Europe. How did it spread? By infiltrating universities for over 200 years. Today, almost every single school teacher and every single university lecturer is rabidly anti-Western and rabidly pro-communist. They are teaching our children. The Communist Manifesto itself states, the communists disdain to conceal their aims. They openly declare that their ends can only be achieved by the forcible overthrow of all existing social systems. Forcible overthrow. Those peace-loving lefties. Russian communists admired the French Revolution, and especially the Jacobins, the extremist French revolutionaries who instigated the Reign of Terror. Over 40,000 people died during the French Revolution. It was to get so much worse. Communism spread across the world, devouring and destroying everything it touched. When the communists came to power in Russia, China, Vietnam, and North Korea, they murdered up to 100 million of their own people, set up a police state that monitored all their own citizens, and drove half the world into poverty. They took anybody who spoke against them to a freezing gulag where they were forced to work, often to death. If a peasant in a gulag picked up a grain of corn from the ground and ate it, they were killed. Millions of people tried desperately to escape the Soviet Union, so the Russians built a wall across Berlin, festooned it with guard towers, and machine-gunned any man, woman, or child who tried to escape. The underlying belief of communism is that it must be worldwide and all-pervasive. Nations must be abolished, private property must be abolished, the family must be abolished, individuality must be abolished, and the entire world must become communist. No other system of government or belief may exist. So for over 200 years, they promoted communism through universities all over the world. Many students love the intellectual conceit of ushering in a worldwide utopia. The theory of communism may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. The communists are further approached with the desire to abolish countries and nationality. The working men have no country. We cannot take from them what they have not got. The communists use our Western freedom against us. Virtually every university in the Western world has become rabidly anti-Western and rabidly pro-communist. Schools teach students that the Western world is evil. It has taken thousands of years to achieve democracy and freedom of speech. Yet more than 50% of today's students have a negative view of democracy, and most agree that certain types of speech should be banned. Our greatest freedom, freedom of speech, is under attack from the university professors. The very institutions that should safeguard free speech want to take it away. The communists use the tactics of divide and conquer. The way to defeat the West is to turn black against white, female against male, gay against straight, said communist leader Ho Chi Minh after murdering 100,000 of his own people. So they divided the West. The communists in the universities pushed not reconciliation, but division. At every turn, they worked to stoke grievance between black and white, female and male, gay and straight. Joseph Stalin, who murdered over 25 million of his own people, including many of his most loyal supporters, referred to Western communists as useful idiots. The useful idiots are with us still. Hollywood actors praise Hugo Chavez, who turned resource-rich Venezuela, with its colossal influx of cash, into the worst economic crisis in Venezuela's history, worse than the US during the Great Depression, and worse than the crisis in Zimbabwe. Despite 3 million people fleeing the country, and millions starving due to Chavez's corruption, incompetence, and violent repression of his own people, Hollywood's Academy Award-winning actors and directors praise Chavez and communism while denouncing the West. Generations of children have been influenced by the hypocritical and vacuous opinions of Hollywood stars and musicians who talk about poverty while living in extreme luxury. The communists also infiltrated the trade union movement, but were unable to turn the working class into communists. The working class had too much common sense. They knew that communism had turned half the world to poverty, destroying every country it touched and causing endless massacres. But the communists were able to destroy the manufacturing sector in the West. Derek Robinson, a communist union convener, led 523 walkouts in 30 months at British Leyland. Communists relentlessly bludgeoned workplaces around the Western world until finally the great manufacturing industry, shipbuilding, steelworks, and factories was destroyed. The great factories closed and prosperous towns fell into crime, poverty, and despair. A former worker said, "When a ship was launched in Newcastle, all the school kids used to go and watch the thing that our fathers and uncles had built. The notion of an integrated, productive community was quite astounding. Factories once held communities together. Australia's factories have almost all gone. Darwin, Melbourne, and Newcastle ports are owned by the Chinese, and in Britain, the Chinese are buying the last few factories that remain. Commentators have recently started calling Britain a failed state. The media have openly worried that the US may fall into another revolution. US power is widely seen as being in decline all around the world as China rises. Children all around the world have been told that their own civilization is in the wrong. The fall of the Western world is almost complete. But it gets worse. The most notorious part of the Communist Manifesto is their desire to destroy the family. The manifesto states, "Abolition of the family." Even the most radical flare up at this infamous proposal of the communists. But opponents of the proposal fail to grasp this key fact. On what foundation is the family built? On capital, on private gain. Abolishing the family will be relatively easy once bourgeois property is abolished. How will they abolish the family? Well, the words mother and father are being banned in certain hospitals and replaced with the words gestational parent and non-gestational parent, or birthing parent and non-birthing parent. Many people using the words ladies and gentlemen in public roles are accused of bullying and threatened with the loss of their jobs. 7 members of the Australian Breastfeeding Association have been accused of harassment and intimidation by the association for using the word mother on a Facebook group, causing some to consider suicide and self-harm. By using the word mother rather than parent, several volunteers reported feeling unsafe, bullied, harassed, and intimidated. One of the ladies said, "Being accused of harassment and intimidation for talking about myself as a mother is one of the most distressing things I have ever experienced. I don't understand how the idea of a breastfeeding counsellor talking about mums creates an unsafe workspace and was ever taken so far." Australian school teachers have been told not to use the words boys and girls in the classroom and to avoid using terms like normal and other, and to avoid mother and father as this is heteronormative and therefore wrong. Preschools in Australia are teaching 3-year-olds about gender fluidity without their parents' knowledge or consent. 10 years ago, several preschools in Sweden banned the words he and she, boy and girl, him and her, insisting that the children use the gender-neutral term hen. The Communist Manifesto also states, the individual must be swept out of the way and made impossible. The abolition of individuality, independence and freedom is undoubtedly aimed at. Shall we take a moment to think about this sentence? Individuality, independence and freedom to be abolished? This is the belief system our schools and universities are instilling in our children. Lastly, we must erase the past so nobody knows anything but the communist view of life. In bourgeois society, Karl Marx wrote, the past dominates the present. In communist society, the present dominates the past. Schools and universities have been rewriting the past for decades, portraying the West as evil, communism as just, destroying statues and brainwashing our children. Additionally, Chinese and Russian hackers have created millions of bots, creating extremist left or right-wing narratives, extremist female or male narratives, extremist black or white narratives, deliberately designed to sow division and discord. This desire to destroy the family and have the state control all aspects of our children's lives evolved into postmodernism and wokeness, which is destroying our children's minds, destroying our civilization, and destroying our future. Both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King spoke out about liberal activists and the harm they were doing. The attempt to implement critical race theory in our schools directly contradicts Martin Luther King's famous quote about judging people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. The communists have been in our universities for over 200 years. But how did they make the professors and students so completely lose their reason? It was the Frankfurt School, established in 1923, that laid the groundwork for the infiltration and overthrow of any shred of common sense and any respect for logic, reason, facts and evidence within our universities and schools. When the First World War broke out, the communists believed that the working class of every country would rise and overthrow their rulers. Instead, they all remained loyal to their own countries and fought to protect them. When the Russian Revolution broke out in 1917, the communists believed it would spread worldwide. It didn't, and the communists were baffled. Why were people so loyal to the civilization that had given them the highest living standards in human history, the highest standards of health, and the greatest freedom in human history? Why ever did they not revolt? The communists decided that the wonder and glory of the Western world had blinded people to how oppressed they were. Since the West refused to overthrow capitalism, the communists decided they would have to destroy the culture. Thus they began the long march through the institutions. In 1919, a communist named Georgy Lukács became the Commissar for Culture in the Bolshevik government in Hungary, and he immediately launched a program to destroy Western civilization. He called it cultural terrorism. He started with radical sex education for children in schools in order to undermine the unity of the family. The people were outraged by the assault upon their culture, and the government only lasted a few months. Georgy Lukács fled to Frankfurt in Germany. In 1923, they set up the Institute for Social Research, widely known as the Frankfurt School. They began studying the work of the most brilliant psychologists. Sigmund Freud said that people were sexually repressed. The communists decided that under capitalism, everybody was oppressed. In 1924, they introduced political correctness, the goal of which was to divide all of Western civilization into minority groups and convince each group that they were oppressed and that the only solution was to overthrow the system. The entire world labored under a state of repression and what he called sexual alienation. The solution was a social and cultural revolution. They brought in the most brilliant psychologists and psychoanalysts and pioneered sexual liberation and gender studies. They decided that there was no difference between men and women, merely socially determined gender roles. According to these Marxist masturbators, gender differences did not exist. In the 1930s, they invented critical theory. The theory was to criticize everything about the West, but offer no solutions. Through unrelenting, destructive criticism of every single institution of the Western world, they would destroy Western civilization. Critical theory is the basis for women's studies, gender studies, gay studies, and all other studies groups found in university campuses. In 1933, the Frankfurt School moved to New York City with help from the president of the University of Columbia. They shifted from destroying German society and culture to attacking American society and culture. Not only did they implement critical theory, but they also developed studies in prejudice. The final step was when they politicized logic itself. In 1947, two members of the Frankfurt School, Theo Adorno and Max Horkheimer, published Dialectic Enlightenment, which argued that the celebration of logic and reason and the Enlightenment itself had led to fascism and totalitarianism. Therefore, reason was oppression and must be abandoned. Horkheimer wrote, "Logic is not independent of content." He meant any argument that criticized Western values was logical, any argument that supported Western values was illogical. In 1950, Theodor Adorno published The Authoritarian Personality, a book that claimed that the American people possessed many fascist traits, and that anyone who supported traditional American culture was psychologically unbalanced and a fascist. Today, the politically correct label opponents fascists and suggest they need psychological treatment in the form of sensitivity training. In the 1960s, they decided that our freedom itself is an illusion and is actually oppressive. In 1965, two Marxists published The Critique of Pure Tolerance, in which they argued that traditional tolerance is intolerance. They called our traditional view of tolerance repressive tolerance and argued for what they called liberating tolerance. Only left-wing ideas could be tolerated, and all other speech must be shut down. This led to politically correct culture in the 1980s. Since logic had no place in these arguments, the goal of PC culture was to show who you could attack and who you couldn't. They also felt that silence and passiveness had allowed all sorts of bad free speech, therefore silence was not allowed. This is why school teachers are taking our children into fields to shout silence is violence. This is what created the deranged culture vomited forth by the social justice warrior school teachers and university professors and media and politicians of today. The Soviet spy and defector Yuri Bezmenov said, even if you show them the truth right in front of their faces, even if you show them the facts right in front of their faces, they cannot see it, they will deny it. They are unable to understand facts. They have been brainwashed. In order to destroy Western culture, they set up all of these victim groups on university campuses all over the world. These departments on university campuses are ground zero for political correctness, and they have been the heart of campus culture from the 1960s onwards. It is in the universities that the push to destroy Western civilization has existed for so long. It is from the university campuses and from the university professors that this dark energy is spewed forth, which is tearing our civilization apart. We must take back our civilization. Our children's futures depend upon it. In 1956, the Russian leader Nikita Khrushchev said, "We will take the US without firing a shot. We do not need to invade. We will destroy you from within." Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is William Flynn. Be sure to vote at our next federal election. Cheerio.